For nearly 23 years, Benjamin Donnie Richie waited on death row in Indiana, his case marked by a long and complex legal journey. It all began on a night in 2000 when Officer Bill Toney was killed during a police pursuit. The events that followed, the chase, the crash, the fatal shot, and a tattoo bearing Officer Toney's unit number, became central to the prosecution's argument and shaped the outcome of the trial. What unfolded after that night was not only a criminal investigation, but a legal battle that stretched across decades, filled with appeals and procedural reviews before the state carried out Ritchie's execution by lethal injection. To understand how this case unfolded, we need to look back at the moments that set everything in motion. The chain of events began on September 29, 2000 in Beech Grove, Indiana, when police responded to a report of a stolen white van from a local gas station. Officers Matthew Hickey, Robert Mercury, and Bill Toney were dispatched to investigate. What appeared to be a routine call quickly escalated when Officer Hickey located the van and confirmed it was stolen. The officers initiated a pursuit, with the van weaving through city streets and neighborhood roads as law enforcement closed in. The chase ended abruptly when the van crashed off the road and into a residential yard. Almost immediately, the occupants of the van made a split-second decision to flee on foot. Officer Hickey managed to apprehend Michael Greer, one of the van's passengers, but Benjamin Richie kept running. Officer Bill Toney chased Richie through a series of backyards, climbing fences and navigating obstacles in the dark. The pursuit was intense and fast-moving, with both men moving quickly across unfamiliar terrain. As Officer Toney closed the distance, the confrontation turned deadly. Richie, armed with a 9mm Glock, fired a shot that struck Officer Toney just above his bulletproof vest. The wound proved fatal. Officer Toney collapsed in a backyard as other officers responded to the sound of gunfire. The loss of an officer in the line of duty immediately heightened the urgency of the situation, prompting a large-scale law enforcement response. Investigators at the scene found crucial evidence. Near the area where Officer Toney was shot, police recovered a discarded wig that matched descriptions given by witnesses of the suspect's disguise. The 9mm Glock used in the shooting was also found, having been tossed aside as Richie tried to escape. These items became central pieces of physical evidence in the case against Richie. After the shooting, Richie managed to slip past the initial police perimeter and disappear into the night. The search for him intensified rapidly. Over 100 officers, including SWAT teams and deputies, participated in a manhunt that locked down neighborhoods and blocked off roads. The community was on edge as law enforcement combed the area for any sign of Richie. It was an anonymous tip that finally led police to Richie's location. He was found hiding at a friend's apartment complex, concealed in a closet. Officers took him into custody without resistance, noting fresh scratches on his arms that were consistent with running through brush and fences during the chase. During booking at the Beech Grove Police Department, Richie made several statements that would later be referenced in court proceedings. According to jail intake records, he asked officers, "What happens if you kill a cop in Indiana?" before being read his Miranda rights. The events of that night, from the stolen van report to Richie's arrest, unfolded in just a matter of hours. But the impact of what happened would reach far beyond that night, raising questions about how a person's background and early life experiences might influence the choices they make under pressure. Benjamin Richie's early years were marked by instability and hardship that shaped nearly every aspect of his development. Born on May 30, 1980, he entered a world already complicated by his mother Marion Martin's struggles with alcohol and drug addiction, which continued throughout her pregnancy. This chaotic environment led to repeated episodes where Richie was left without adequate care. Reports from child welfare agencies describe multiple instances of abandonment during his childhood, with neighbors sometimes finding him alone and unsupervised. Temporary foster placements rarely lasted, and Richie often cycled back into the same patterns of neglect. By middle school, Benjamin was already struggling both academically and behaviorally. Teachers noted his inability to concentrate for more than short periods and frequent classroom disruptions. At age 10, a psychiatric evaluation diagnosed him with bipolar disorder and identified cognitive impairments that made learning and social interaction difficult. These challenges, combined with the absence of consistent support at home, set the stage for ongoing problems in school and with peers. Ritchie's difficulties extended beyond the classroom. As he entered his teen years, his behavioral issues escalated, leading to early encounters with the juvenile justice system. Between 1993 and 1996, he cycled through a series of youth facilities, each one marked by inadequate mental health support. Records indicate that his treatment for neurological and mood disorders was often inconsistent, with missed therapy sessions and problems accessing prescribed medications. This lack of effective intervention made it difficult for Ritchie to break the cycle of disruptive behavior and left him without the tools to manage his mental health. His academic path ended abruptly in the 9th grade, when he dropped out of school entirely. Without the structure of school and lacking family support, Ritchie became even more vulnerable to negative influences. In August 1998, shortly after turning 18, he was arrested for burglary, his first adult offense. Over the next few years, his criminal record grew, mostly with arrests for petty theft and drug possession. Probation reports from this period mention persistent symptoms of untreated mental illness and Ritchie's refusal to participate in further mental health referrals. During the trial, defense attorneys emphasized these early life experiences, arguing that severe childhood trauma and untreated mental illness impaired Ritchie's judgment and impulse control. They hoped this context would influence the jury's view of his culpability. Prosecutors, however, maintained that many people face difficult upbringings without resorting to violence. As the trial moved forward, the jury had to weigh the impact of Ritchie's past against the evidence presented in court, setting the stage for a closely watched legal battle. Inside the courtroom, the trial unfolded as both sides presented their strongest evidence and arguments. The prosecution built its case around forensic analysis, focusing on ballistic evidence that linked the 9mm Glock recovered near the scene directly to the fatal shooting of Officer Bill Toney. Experts testified that the bullets found at the scene matched those fired from the Glock, reinforcing the claim that Ritchie was responsible for pulling the trigger. Surveillance footage showed Ritchie near the stolen van and then fleeing the area, placing him at the heart of the events leading up to Officer Toney's death. Ritchie's defense team argued that the shooting was accidental, insisting that the gun discharged during a struggle as Ritchie tried to escape. Ritchie claimed in statements made during booking that the firearm slipped from his hand and that he heard it go off several times by itself as he was running away. However, prosecutors countered this narrative by highlighting Ritchie's own admission that he feared another arrest would send him back to prison for 8 more years due to his probation status. This suggested a motive to avoid capture and undermined the argument that the shooting was simply a tragic accident. The prosecution also introduced evidence that painted a picture of intent and lack of remorse. Central to this was the tattoo on Ritchie's left forearm, Officer Toney's unit number, inked in elaborate Gothic script just 11 days after the murder. Large photographs of the tattoo were displayed in court for the jury to see. Prosecutors argued that this was more than a mark of guilt. It was a permanent reminder Ritchie intended to keep as a trophy, demonstrating pride in his actions. The defense tried to explain the tattoo as a sign of guilt and regret, but this claim lost credibility in light of Ritchie's behavior in court. During the victim impact statements, Officer Toney's widow, Dee, addressed the jury and described the profound loss her family suffered. Ritchie interrupted her repeatedly, laughing, and when she called him a coward, responding by looking her in the eye and calling her the B word. This outburst, witnessed directly by the jury, further damaged any perception that Ritchie felt remorse or understood the consequences of his actions. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for only 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts, including murder, auto theft, possession of an unlicensed firearm, and resisting arrest. The penalty phase moved quickly as well, with the jury unanimously recommending the death penalty after just 90 minutes. The evidence, the testimony, and Ritchie's own conduct in the courtroom all played a role in shaping the outcome. As the trial concluded, one image remained central in the minds of everyone present: the tattoo Ritchie chose to place on his arm, a symbol that would come to define both the case and his legacy. From the moment Benjamin Richie was booked into jail, one detail stood out to everyone involved in the case: the freshly inked tattoo on his neck, bearing Officer Tony's unit number 37. Its location made it impossible to miss, appearing in every courtroom appearance and prison photograph over the next 2 decades. Prosecutors argued that Ritchie had chosen to permanently mark himself with this number just days after the murder, presenting the tattoo as a symbol of pride and a lack of remorse. They emphasized that the bold, visible placement was not an accident. It was a deliberate act meant to signal ownership of what he had done. The prosecution's strategy relied on the jury's reaction to this unmistakable visual evidence. They displayed enlarged photographs of the tattoo next to crime scene images, asking jurors to consider what kind of person would commemorate their crime in such a permanent and public way. According to court records and later interviews, the tattoo quickly became a focal point in the trial. Prosecutors described it as a trophy, arguing that Ritchie's decision to display Officer Tony's unit number on his body was meant to celebrate the killing rather than express guilt or regret. Ritchie's defense team attempted to challenge this interpretation, but their arguments did not resonate with the jury. They suggested that the tattoo might have represented something other than pride, but without a clear explanation from Ritchie himself, their efforts fell flat. Throughout the trial and the years that followed, Ritchie refused to discuss the meaning of the tattoo in interviews or with mental health professionals. This silence allowed the prosecution's narrative to take hold, reinforcing the idea that the tattoo was a symbol of defiance and a lack of remorse. Jurors later reported that the tattoo played a significant role in their decision-making process. Its presence in the courtroom served as a constant reminder of the crime, and several jurors described it as the factor that convinced them Ritchie had no intention of taking responsibility for his actions. The tattoo was cited in media coverage and appellate court opinions as a key piece of evidence supporting the death penalty verdict. As the years passed and the case moved through various stages of appeal, the tattoo's visibility continued to shape public and legal perceptions of Ritchie's character. It served as a lasting, inescapable reminder of the events that led to Officer Tony's death and the consequences Ritchie would face, both in court and beyond. After the trial ended, Benjamin Ritchie's legal fight entered a new phase that would last nearly 23 years. His case, like all capital cases in Indiana, began with an automatic appeal to the Indiana Supreme Court. Ritchie's lawyers argued that his original defense team hadn't done enough to present his mental health history, including his bipolar disorder diagnosis and cognitive challenges from childhood. They claimed these details might have changed the jury's decision on sentencing. In 2006, the state's highest court rejected this argument, finding that the trial had included sufficient evidence about Ritchie's background. The following year, a petition for rehearing met the same fate. Each round of review followed a similar pattern: careful examination of the issues, but no reversal of the conviction or sentence. Years later, Ritchie's legal team tried a new approach. In 2015, they filed a federal habeas corpus petition, focusing on how the jury interpreted the tattoo bearing Officer Tony's unit number. The petition argued that jurors had been overly influenced by the tattoo, seeing it as a sign of pride rather than any potential remorse. Affidavits from 2 jurors confirmed that the tattoo played a significant role in their decision. This legal strategy was unusual, as few appeals had focused so directly on the jury's reaction to physical evidence. In 2018, however, the Indiana Supreme Court dismissed the petition, ruling that the tattoo's admission was proper and that jurors were allowed to interpret evidence as they saw fit. Ritchie's final attempt to avoid execution came in 2024, when he petitioned the governor of Indiana for clemency. He wrote letters expressing remorse for his actions and highlighted his efforts to improve himself while incarcerated, such as completing educational programs and creating artwork for charity. Despite these claims, the parole board was not persuaded. They noted that Richie had never directly apologized to Officer Tony's family until his last appeal, and that his outreach came very late in the process. Throughout these years, Officer Tony's family remained vocal in their opposition to any reduction in Richie's sentence. They shared statements about the ongoing impact of the crime on their lives and pointed to Richie's silence about the tattoo's meaning as evidence of continued disrespect. The governor ultimately denied clemency, citing the seriousness of the crime and the wishes of the victim's family. By early 2025, every legal option had been exhausted. No further appeals or stays remained, and the courts confirmed that the verdict and sentence would stand. With the legal process complete, Ritchie's fate shifted from the courtroom to the daily reality of life on death row. Indiana's death row stands out for a unique policy. Inmates are allowed to keep cats in their cells. For Benjamin Richie, caring for a gray tabby named Ghost offered a rare sense of comfort and routine during his last 4 years. Animal welfare logs recorded regular veterinary visits, and the prison maintained strict cleanliness protocols for both Richie and his pet. This small companionship became an important part of his daily life, breaking the monotony of long hours spent alone. Richie's days were shaped by the realities of confinement. He spent about 22 hours each day in a 6 by 9 foot cell, with meals delivered through a slot in the door and 2 hours of recreation in a secure yard. The structure was rigid, designed to limit movement and contact with other inmates. Mental health evaluations took place twice a year, and Richie's medical records show that his bipolar disorder diagnosis remained active throughout his incarceration. He declined medication after 2010, telling staff he felt clearer without it, but continued to participate in regular assessments. Despite the isolation, Richie found ways to occupy his time. He earned his GED in 2008 through the prison's literacy program, and later completed correspondence courses in art history and philosophy. These educational pursuits reflected his effort to maintain a sense of progress and purpose, even in the face of a life sentence. Prison staff noted that he often studied late into the night, making use of the reading lights permitted on death row. Art became another outlet for Richie. He developed a detailed portrait style using colored pencils and donated paper, creating pieces that he sold online to raise money for his legal appeals. His artwork provided both a creative escape and a practical way to support his ongoing fight in the courts. The prison allowed him extra supplies in his final month, with officers carefully monitoring each item for security reasons. Disciplinary records from his time on death row show only a handful of minor infractions, most related to refusing meals or shouting during lockdowns. Correctional officers described him as generally quiet and orderly, but noted that he could become volatile after legal setbacks. These incidents were rare, and for the most part, Richie maintained a routine focused on study, art, and caring for Ghost. In his final weeks, Richie spent time with the prison chaplain, preparing spiritual statements and reflecting on his life. Chaplain's notes mention his focus on meditation and seeking peace, drawing on both Buddhist and Christian traditions. He was granted brief visits to the prison chapel, where he continued these practices in the evenings. As the scheduled date for his execution approached, Richie's daily routine shifted. The prison made preparations according to long-standing procedures, ensuring his final days followed a set protocol. As the day of Benjamin Richie's execution arrived, one of the last personal choices he was offered was his final meal. Indiana's Department of Correction, like many states, permits this tradition as a small gesture of dignity. Richie requested Olive Garden's tour of Italy, a combination of chicken parmigiana, lasagna, and fettuccine alfredo, along with 2 cans of Sprite. The meal was delivered to his cell in the late afternoon, providing a brief moment of normalcy amid the strict routines of death row. Prison staff observed that Richie ate about half of his meal, setting aside much of the lasagna but finishing most of the chicken. The choice of Olive Garden was not random. According to social worker records, Richie had celebrated childhood birthdays at the restaurant, making this meal a connection to one of the few stable and positive memories from his early life. Staff noted that he arranged the dishes carefully on his tray, as if trying to recreate the experience of dining out. Even in the confines of his cell, Alongside the meal, Richie was offered the traditional last cigarette, a practice still allowed in Indiana despite the prison's general no-smoking policy. He declined, consistent with reports that he had quit smoking 3 years earlier during a period of spiritual reflection. This refusal, along with his choice of comfort food, suggested a focus on clarity and a desire to hold on to meaningful memories in his final hours. Ritchie's last hours also included a 90-minute visit with his longtime pen pal, Ivana. The two spoke quietly about her plans to return to Sweden and his hopes that his artwork might help others in the future. This final conversation offered a chance for personal connection and closure, underscoring the importance of human relationships, even at the end of life. Before being taken from his cell, Richie wrote brief letters to his mother and 2 half-siblings. Corrections staff reviewed the notes for security, then set them aside for mailing after his death. The letters contained short personal reflections and an apology for not being better, but avoided any mention of Officer Tony or the events that led to his conviction. Media witnesses later described Richie as notably calm as he was escorted from his cell to the execution chamber. His actions and demeanor in these final moments reflected a quiet acceptance and a focus on the few things he could still control: his words, his meal, and his final goodbyes. As preparations for the execution began, the gravity of the moment settled over everyone present. Indiana's execution protocol is designed to carry out the death sentence with a sequence of steps intended to be orderly and controlled. On the night of Benjamin Ritchie's execution, the process began just after midnight inside the secure chamber at Indiana State Prison. Corrections staff, medical personnel, and official witnesses were present, each with a specific role to play. The room was brightly lit, and Richie was secured to the gurney as the procedure moved forward according to established state guidelines. Before the administration of the lethal injection, Richie was given the opportunity to make a final statement. He declined to address Officer Tony's family, who were present in the victim's viewing area. Instead, his last words were directed to those who had supported him over the years. He said, "I love my family, my friends, and all the support I've gotten. I hope they all find peace." Witnesses noted that he spoke clearly and calmly, offering a brief but heartfelt message. He made no mention of the crime or the victim's family in his final moments. Once Ritchie's statement concluded, the warden signaled for the procedure to begin. The medical team administered the 3-drug sequence as required by Indiana's protocol. The process itself lasted less than 10 minutes from the start of the injection to the official pronouncement of death. According to media witnesses and corrections staff, Ritchie showed no visible signs of distress or discomfort during the procedure. The sequence was carried out as intended, with Ritchie losing consciousness quickly and remaining still throughout. This observation was consistent with the state's standards for humane execution. Officer Tony's widow, Dee, was present in the viewing area with other family members. While official records do not describe her reaction in detail, her attendance underscored the significance of the moment for those most affected by the crime. For the Tony family, the execution marked the end of a long and difficult chapter. At 12:46 a.m., the attending physician pronounced Benjamin Richie dead. His body was released to a private funeral home chosen by his family, following standard protocol. The state's involvement in the case ended with this final act, closing a legal process that had spanned nearly 23 years. This outcome brought a sense of finality to a case that had shaped the lives of everyone involved. The conclusion of Benjamin Ritchie's case highlights how the consequences of a single act can echo through families, communities, and the justice system for decades. The nearly 23-year appeals process showcased the thoroughness and complexity of capital punishment cases in America, where every detail is examined and each side has the chance to be fully heard. This story raises important questions about punishment, mental health, and the possibility of second chances. Ritchie's early trauma and mental illness stood in stark contrast to the severity of his crime, prompting deep reflection throughout the legal journey. Cases like this reveal how the search for justice can be long and difficult, and remind us how capital cases can take decades to reach closure. If you found this breakdown of Benjamin Ritchie's case insightful, Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more legal journey stories.